one question that comes up all the time when we are discussing cultural differences is who should adapt to whom? If you remember, at some point in Quebec, there was a whole discussion about accommodement raisonnable. Well, fundamentally, it boils down to that. Who should adapt to whom? So, I'm an engineer. I like to use numbers in order to kind of crystallize people's thinking. So here's the way I would like to tackle this conversation. Let's say this bar represents the gap that we have to bridge between newcomers and Canadians. And the question becomes, what percentage of the adaptation should each group make in order to bridge the gap? You'll notice one thing, I'm using numbers as a way to crystallize people's thinking, because I found that if we discuss it in general terms, what I end up hearing is, well, everybody should make an effort. Everybody should make as much effort as they can, and but some will need to make more effort than others. Well, that's great, but it's not very specific. So let's make it more specific. What percentage of the adaptation should each group make in order to bridge the gap? I have asked that question to many, many people across Canada, both immigrants and non-immigrants. And the answer that I get most often is 80-20. Now, if you were thinking 75-25, there's no difference between 80-20 and 75-25. This is not engineering or accounting. We don't need decimal points, okay? The idea is this. Most newcomers, when they decided to move to Canada, realized that, hey, I will need to make the bulk of the adaptation because I'm going there. And most Canadians, when they sign up for having people immigrate to their country, think, well, I'm willing to make some effort, but I'm not going to make half of the effort because that would not be fair. So 80-20 we tend to have consensus in Canada on 80-20. You'll notice one thing, that consensus is cultural. In other countries, the split will be different. So if you think of the United States, for example, the split is not 80-20. In the United States, it's more like 90-10 or 95-5. Okay? The way I found out, very simple. I told American audiences 80-20, and their reaction was, oh, 20% is too much. 10% is okay. All right, so it's clear, okay? And I'm sure this has changed since the last presidential election in the United States. In Western Europe, the split tends to be 99-1 or 98-2. So I was at a conference in Vienna in Austria. It was the International Association of Cross-Cultural Management, and there were in the room people from all over Europe. And I asked them, well, in your country, what is the split? And the answers I got were 99-1 or 98-2. Okay? Actually, one French person said jokingly, in France, it's 105 minus 5. It's a joke, obviously, but the joke is very telling. Okay? Fundamentally, when you get to Europe, if you go there professionally, you will adapt. They don't. Okay? They're very clear on that. If you go to Asia, like East Asia in particular, Japan, Korea, or China, there, the concept of adaptation does not really exist. What I mean by this is I will never be Chinese. I will never be Japanese. I will never be Korean. I may learn Chinese. I may learn Korean or Japanese. I may get a passport maybe, but I will never be considered as Chinese. Okay? My wife has told me many times, the best I can hope for is to be a good friend of the Chinese people. Now, don't get me wrong. The fact that I cannot become Chinese does not mean I'm poorly treated when I go to China. I've been there 12 times, and every time I've been treated as a guest of honor. But you'll notice the word, I'm a guest, I am not a family member. The way my relatives refer to me, my Chinese relatives refer to me, is their foreign friend. Or at least that's the way my wife translates it. So, in Canada, we have consensus on 80-20. The real issue in Canada is not agreeing on the split. The real issue is the gap is much bigger than everybody thought. It is bigger than newcomers thought when it would be when they signed up for immigration. It is bigger than Canadians thought it would be when they signed up for letting people in their country. So what happens? Well, many newcomers at some point will think, hey, I've done my 80%. I've done my part. Okay? So what does it mean? Well, I'm learning English. I have bought winter gear. I'm cheering for the Flames or the Blue Jays or the Oilers, whichever team is in favor in the city I landed. I have bought a barbecue for I'm sure most of you know Russell Peters, and he has an entire skit on his father buying a barbecue to become Canadian. And it's bang on. I bought a barbecue for the same purpose. Buying a barbecue for many immigrants is a key step in the Canadianization process. So at some point, newcomers will feel, hey, I've done my part. And on the other side, many Canadians think they've done their part. I'm eating sushi. I can eat with chopsticks. I've accepted that the RCMP officer can wear a turban with a uniform. I have accepted that the Christmas party is no longer called the Christmas party, it's called the year-end party. All right? And so what happens? Well, at some point, we'll all feel, hey, I've done my part. And whatever's left, it's your problem. You need to make the adaptation. So we end up in a situation where there's still a big gap, and everybody thinks the other is going to bridge that gap. So my experience, so I've done workshops all across Canada for like hundreds of organizations, thousands of people, and what I find is the biggest challenge is people realizing what are the differences that they did not identify as being cultural. And so once we've identified those differences, then we can work on them. How do we do that? Well, from my perspective, here's the best way of dealing with it. As a newcomer, I need to learn the unwritten rules of Canadian organizations and follow them. For that, somebody needs to explain to me the rules. And those who understand those rules are in the best position to explain those rules and give me feedback. And this way, we can meet. Now you'll notice, we're not meeting in the middle. We are meeting 80-20.